Thank you, thank you. So yeah, really excited to get into some grant research today. The panel, I believe, is specifically focused on the state of Web3 Grants Report. So we're mainly going to center it around some of the takeaways and learnings from that. And you will see some skillful, hopefully dilly-dallying for now while we're waiting for Anke and can officially get started. But I think maybe we can go ahead and just start doing introductions and hope that we'll have the full panel when it's time for Anke. So I'll just do a brief one. As mentioned, I'm Eugene. I'm currently at Scroll, but the main hat I guess I'm wearing on this stage is with MetaGov and the Grant Innovation Lab, which I have the pleasure of working with Ben and Anke as co-authors of this paper, as well as some others who are here today. So yeah, just really excited to share some of the learnings from this, the state of Web3 grants. So with that, maybe let's just go down the line and do some quick intros. So Ben, can you kick us off?
Yeah, hi. My name is Ben. I'm the lead at the Web3 Consortium, and through this and through my role at Rate Guild, we kind of like got in touch, and then I joined MetaGov Grant Innovation Lab, where I was at the sidelines for long when it came to the Web3 State of Grants report, but we were working on the Grant Maturity Index. And we saw very clearly the overlap of, we got the state of Web3 grants. Now let's look at how mature are they actually, and let's build an index. And yeah, that's why I'm here.
And that paper also just recently came out, and you should read it because it's great.
Mahesh? Hey everyone, my name is Mahesh Murthy. I'm the founder of Karma. We have a product called GAP. It's a Grantee Accountability Protocol. It's used by many grant communities to hold their grantees accountable, to track their work, their milestones, and measure impact. And for grantees, this is a great way to build up a reputation and then attract more funding. So that's GAP.
Hello. Oh. Oh, I got this one. Yeah, I have to I think this is a good volume. No, I noticed this the other day too. There was one panelist that was just really loud. I'm generally already pretty loud, so we don't need to overdo it. My name is Anke. I'm the ecosystem growth lead at the Stellar Development Foundation, and recently also have become a contributor of the Grants Innovation Lab from MetaGov. So very excited for that. My team leads the ecosystem growth, or the Stellar Community Fund, which is an open application grants program for projects building on Stellar to go basically from 0 to 0 on development and growth. So yeah, happy to share a bit more about what on the grants report later.
Awesome, yeah, thank you all for helping us get kicked off. So I think in general, with this report, between last year's and this year's, we've covered a bit over 20 different programs, and there have been a lot of different learnings. At the same time, we're in crypto, so something that was released in September is already as good as 10 years old. But nonetheless, I think it's worth diving into some of the trends that we did pick up there. And I think it's also very much fair game if you're hearing any kind of buzz about new topics, ideas, also feel free to bring that up. But maybe now we'll start with you, Anke, and go in reverse order down the line. I'm going to keep doing that. But yeah, to just start off with, what are some of the general takeaways and trends that are kind of most top of mind for you?
In relation to the grant space, right?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, in terms of I'll start with giving a bit of background on I guess you already gave a bit of background on the report, right? When I left. Yeah, so I wrote the Octant report, and honestly, it was a really great experience too, because you were able to, I'm always in my own little ecosystem, furthering kind of what new, review guidelines looks like, what governance looks like, but then actually going out and looking at other structures was really helpful. And I think some of the, things that across the space, across, I think, 13 or 15 programs that we looked at, I think one was, the impact measurement. And that everyone's saying oh yeah, the impact is this, but actually what they mean is output of the grant program. Because if you say oh, we have distributed for instance SCF has distributed 32 million in XLM, let's say to 500 projects. That is not an outcome, that's the output, right? So what does that actually mean? What does that contribute to? And I think a lot of grant programs are still figuring out what that actually means and how to also measure it across the space. And then impact, I guess, is a whole whole other thing that we'll need to like revisit. But that was like the one thing I think also, and there's a few other things that stood out that we can that we can help with and improve across the space.
From my point of view, looking at the report from last year, I think there was one last year also, I believe. Yeah. It feels like the grant programs are maturing, for sure. Like, there used to be just the spray and pray approach. Thankfully, not anymore. And for me, I'm talking from a grantee point of view, like I've received a couple of grants. And back when we were like getting grants from public good for building public goods, and now things have like improved in so many ways. Like they're asking like exactly like what are you just building was like what they used to ask. Now like there's programs asking like how do you plan to measure impact? Like there's still a lot of ways to go with the impact measurement, but I think they're asking the program operators are improving, and then they're asking the right questions. So it definitely, we have come a long way in just in the one last year. So yeah, that was my biggest takeaway, I think.
I'm not disagreeing, by the way, what I said. I do agree with that too, but there's still like some room to grow.
Yeah, quite a few steps to take more, but yeah, I agree.
Even the groups that have been granting for 100 years have room to grow. So yeah, that's a never-ending reality.
I like that you said they seem to mature. So like they really do, and that we were able to measure maturity in some capacity like is testament to that. However, I would say the last year has been a bit of a weird state for Web3 grants, because we saw consolidation, and even though the Web3 Grants Report grew in terms of coverage, like the programs that kind of lead the pack, they really did mature and they did consolidate. But in terms of experimentation, it got a bit more niche-y, and my hot take would be that Web3 grants shouldn't mature too much, because then it becomes very bureaucratic, and we don't want to end up in the spot where the European Union is right now.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up an interesting point of sort of what does it mean to mature as a grant program? And there's the element of like you can just go in the more bureaucratic direction of just, you want to issue more grants, so that just means more layers of bureaucracy. But I think, and I guess maybe the question that I'll pose to you three is, when we're sitting here or wherever the next DevCon will be a year from now-ish, hopefully reviewing the 2025 State of Web3 Grants Report, like, what do you think we're going to be talking about a year from now, right? What does it mean for us to be maturing or changing in the space? And I think already since, we started writing this year's report, which was in kind of March-ish, April-ish, through when we released the report in September, I mean, right, this summer, especially with some of the Arbitrum programs, like we saw huge issuance, right? Like the OPRPGF3, which was, I think, December, January-ish, right? That was like 100 million OP total. Like we just saw these behemoth programs happening. And it feels like everyone's kind of taking maybe we should take it down a bit. And like we saw a lot of prospective grants, and that's kind of like the main starting point is we want to grant people to do a thing. But like RPGF was the first, and now like through Retro XYZ at Gitcoin we're seeing more experiments. So yeah, I guess maybe a forward-looking question for the three of you to kind of continue this trends one for a little bit. What would be your guesses of one kind of change or maturation, or however you want to frame it? But yeah, how do you think things are going to change between now and a year from now?
Because I started with the whole maturity thing, I'll take this first stab at it. I think just like grant programs ask these projects like, okay, what are you building? What are your milestones? Are you hitting these milestones? I think grant programs themselves have started saying, okay, this is what we want to accomplish. But I think as they mature, it will become more fine-grained goals. So we want to allocate $1 million, and for that $1 million, this is what we want to get out of it. Like these many applications built, which gets this much traction, this much TVL, this much transactions. Like I don't think anyone is saying that today, but I feel like that's what I hope they say. Just like you're holding the grant projects accountable, like programs also become accountable that way by putting like numbers on it at least. So at least that's my initial thing and hope.
Yeah, I think I would definitely second that, because like if you think about it, right, in a way, like we don't really know as an ecosystem what we really want. And that's a problem, because we are expecting that somehow from the project. But as an ecosystem, I mean, obviously, like we have higher level missions, like, oh yeah, we want the ecosystem to grow, like, to the direction to go, whatever. But we don't actually set concrete like metrics, even just like a yearly goal for like, well, or it might be like, oh, I mean, I know like even just a few years ago, it was like literally, hey Anke, can you like distribute like $10 million in like excellent to like about like this amount of projects? And I'm like, sure, yeah, whatever. But then I realized, wait a minute, like sure, when I do that, it doesn't actually mean that there's actually like value for the ecosystem, because I could distribute it to like projects that are totally unrelated. Obviously, that's not what we did, right? But I think in terms of like when we think about, and hopefully this is what we'll discuss at the next DEF CON, is like, well, actually measuring, maybe even comparing grant ROI per grant program. I would love that we were able to do that, but in order to do that, we'll need to like, I think each grant program should adopt some kind of theory of change approach, right? And I know that you've been, like talking about this a lot, but it's actually like, well, what are the outcomes? And then what are the outputs? And then what are the activities that we're doing in order to actually get the inputs of the projects that we're looking for? So yeah, I would love to discuss like, hey, actually, like my grant ROI is better than yours because of this and this and that. Right now, we don't even know what our grant ROI is, so we can only speculate.
So, I would think that earlier you mentioned that we are seeing outputs, and yes, in Web3 we want things to be disruptive. We want things to be now and totally different. But I think in 1 year from now, we would actually start seeing the impact and the outcomes of like this year's grants. And you mentioned theory of change. I would say, like I was speaking earlier to another individual in the space, and they were posing this question, like, what is your theory of change? And I think it should be incremental. Like, we do baby steps, and through passing, like by putting one foot after another, we actually get where we want to be, and really keeping track of like the path we walk as grant operators, as donors to these grant programs, but also as grant applicants. Together, we then can look back and we actually see the change, but until we are there, it's not going to be that obvious.
Yeah, as much as I've been barking up the theories of change tree for a while now, my personal prediction is that there will be zero formal theories of change a year from now, unfortunately.
We can change that, like we can actually have a theory of change to change that particular statement. So.
But it's interesting because, did you want to jump in? No, I was just going to say, I think and especially like now being, because like when we started all this, and even as we were releasing the report, I was just jumping into Scroll, so like I'm early days in industry. I've more been on the observing and nonprofit side for the last 4 or 5 years. So it's much easier to like be on that side and criticize of like, why aren't you doing this like academically rigorous, logical thing? And then you get there and you're like, oh, just getting all the stakeholders at the same table for this conversation only happens at offsites. And then when we have offsites, it's like priority 37 because of all the fires we have to put out as an organization. And so I would love for it to happen. If there's anyone who's like launching an entire project or protocol, I think the earlier you embed theory of change thinking into your mission kind of structuring and organization and design, right? Even projects that have a clear like, what are you trying to accomplish in the world? What is different if Scroll, Stellar, Ethereum, whatever? Like most companies don't actually say, here's how I want the world to be different. It's we grow so the world's better, right? And like there's a huge logic leap between like us growing and the world being better. And like, yeah, I would love to see that change. But
I think we should start a poly market. Like we should put something on there. Come back next year and see who gets the money. I'll take the other side of the bet.
Okay,
I think there will be some.
All right, we'll plan this out right after. But I want to dig into this question of impact, and I think it's one that's top of mind for everyone. I know in the report we kind of mentioned the fact that impact is a highly misused term in the space, as Anke was alluding to before. Most groups conflate impact with the outcomes, right? And if taking like a program evaluation approach, you have resources that fund activities that produce an output, like something emerges, usually the milestone you committed to as a grantee. People interact with whatever that produced, and then that's the outcomes that happen, and then that playing out over years is what produces impact. And so I guess for the three of you, what either have you been seeing from the impact side that is giving you hope that we're going to be more nuanced about this and have actual better outcomes, versus, and you can pick do you want to be more optimistic or pessimistic here, versus what are you kind of seeing as a fundamental blocker, something that people aren't getting, something that's falling on deaf ears? Yeah, so which direction y'all want to go with? We'll go down the line.
I can take a terribly pessimistic stance on that, so I make it easier for the optimists, maybe. So, like, when we look at what a grant, like the term grants actually mean, then it means that you fund something where the outcomes are uncertain. You don't know what will come out of it, and that's why it gets funded, because you want to change something, and you can't change if you know what's gonna come out of it. You can estimate and you can approximate, but you never know for certain. And the reason why I'm pessimistic is because I've been writing quite a bit of EU grant applications, and like the impact and outcomes and outputs section is there quite extensive. And it's been established for quite some time, but it doesn't really do anything. Yes, people and academics will talk to like local stakeholders, and they will get like the civil society involved, they will get companies involved, but at the end of the day, it is still a grant. So people don't know, and people will optimize for this impact section. And we need to be conscious of that when we're giving out grants. That shouldn't mean that we shouldn't hold projects accountable to their outcomes, outputs, and impact.
I agree with that, but I will also take the optimist, I think, sake, as I usually do, because I'm generally like optimistic person. I actually believe we'll see a lot of change over the next year, because we have seen a lot of change over the past year, and just in the number of conversations that have been happening across the space with impact, and the sheer fact that there's literally like 10 talks that are like on real world impact or something like in this very conference, right? And so like, I guess my theory is the more like the same people kind of talk to each other, they'll feel embarrassed the next time they'll talk to each other about the same topic and realize no change has been made. And then it's like, oh shit, we should actually, oh sorry, I shouldn't curse, but we should actually probably do something about this instead of just talking about it, right? So like, you know, I have that natural passion. I think we just talked about this as well, right? Where it's like, all right, well, let's actually think about this, because like there's a roadmap. The main blocker as well, we need actually to put some effort and time into and coordination into like actually like figuring out on some kind of baseline with one another. But from that, I think we can actually, like, once we figure out what the sweet spot is, not going too deep because it's just too hard and it gets really messy and incomparable, but not too high level, so there's actually somewhat of a depth, and we can actually somewhat measure it to some, you know, real world change in the world or SDG goal or whatnot. And yeah, I think like that's like the main thing. I think that it will go well. And I also think if we can then agree upon that, we can perhaps even agree upon, well, there's impact on the project. So like, let's say project can then, I was just talking about this earlier, project can, let's say, like hire a team to do like build XYZ feature. That we can already do pretty well, right, with Karma Gap, and I'll let you talk about that as well. But then we have like the ecosystem output. That's generally like verifiable. I think where it gets tricky is the real world impact. Right, where it's just like, all right, now you're in the like traditional world of impact investing, and then you open up all the different wormholes and problems associated with that. But once we have kind of like, we can say like, well, like grantee A, that well-known project that so on ecosystem, but like had really high like real world impact. You can say like, well, that was a successful grant, right? And that can actually tie into somewhat of a grant ROI. And so I think we can logically get there. We will need to coordinate. I know that you've been working on a framework, so I'm gonna like hit you up on that. And then, yeah, we're just all a bit more open-minded and not too like, like focused on our own ecosystems. I think we can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything more to add. I'm an optimist, and we ourselves are working on many things, so I'm very hopeful we'll make more progress by next year.
Yeah, and I guess to add to the optimist side, because I agree with the pessimist tendencies, but at least one point of optimism is at least seeing that there's new tools emerging that can help with some of these elements. You know, I think the fact that we have Karma Gap, that we have Impact Gardens, that we have all these different tools, it's actually getting more and more realistic to understand how far can we get with these tools and what's missing from them that's still needed to get it. And those are like the baby steps in making progress and getting there. But I know we're getting towards the tail end of our panel together. Two last questions. So one is just on the systems of support side. So we recognize that grants are great. Everyone, especially building something, it's great to get money, you kind of need it. But that's usually not enough. And it's important to provide other types of support. So I'd be interested in going down, maybe starting with you, Anke, and coming down of just what you've seen that's one type of support for grantees that you think more grant programs should be thinking about.
Yeah, you can also like read all about this in the State of Web3 reports, of course. But I think one key differentiator that we have seen that people at like accelerator type or incubator type or even like boot camp, like short boot camp type of like programs to their like awards and their grants. And this actually helps actually improve that grant ROI quite a bit because you don't have to like connect with people one-on-one. You can still do it in somewhat of a programmatic approach, which is necessary for grants, and also due to like some of the decentralization aspects to it. But you can really like help projects figure out like what they're going to build. And actually like it can, on Stellar we have like something called Kickstart. It's 5 days. We send anyone to it who doesn't have like a really great product market fit or a really great plan to build yet. And so they can actually figure out during those 5 days, well actually like they either have like a fully like MVP built on Stellar or they realize actually this is not a great like ecosystem for me at all because I'm looking for something like, you know, like I don't know, some other chain to like build on. And that has been really helpful in actually having a lot more impact. And this is when actually we see those grantees then get the grant funding, they're able to scale a lot quicker. So like people that actually got started that then get a grant are able to like much more frequently get also like an investment from our investments team, for instance. So we can see really, that I think more grant programs are realizing that. And if you haven't done it yet, definitely do it. I think Octon too had a really great accelerator recently. There was a lot of hype upon. I wasn't able to get too involved yet, but we'll do next time. But yeah, so that's what I would say.
Yeah, like for me, just as a grantee point of view or someone building a product, I really wish programs really shield our projects. Like they're giving the money, so I mean, there are two things to a good product. Like you build a quality product and you get distribution, right? Distribution is something they can help. Like they should be shilling all the projects a lot, like who they're funded, which surprisingly they don't do, and I don't understand why. So I really hope they do that. I think that's the only one I have.
So I think it is for grantees, speaking to some and like knowing from my own experience, it's very important that like they feel like human beings, not robots filling out forms. So the human aspect of, well, let's have a webinar. I mean, you know, there are many webinars, and you know, webinars are not going to save the world, but they do make people feel like there is human on the other side of this application, and giving feedback. Like, you know, it is hard sending out rejection letters, but you know, they are very valuable. Giving feedback and not making grantees fill out one and the same form over and over again. So supporting like the composability and reusability of information that needs to be there anyway, I think would help ship the process along.
Awesome, and with that, time is unfortunately up, but if anyone wants to geek out on grants, please feel free to chat with any of us later. And yeah, let's just have a round of applause for the panelists.
And for Eugene.